Hopefully it's not too scary for you all. All right. So let's start off with, before you even look at that question on the screen, right? Some of you all may have never done remainder and factor theorem as yet. Believe it or not, remainder and factor theorem has to do with dividing and knowing what a factor is. Let's go back to primary school. If in primary school they had asked you to divide this, let's say you had 22. I remember in primary school, you would have no calculators, right? So let's say you have 22 divided by what? 5. And the teacher asks you to work out that question. Tell me if this seems familiar. If this is the answer you would get. You would say, well, 5 could go into 22 4 times, right? Because you know that your best approximation is, well, 5 by 4 is 20, right? And then what remainder would you get? Because we know 5 cannot go flushly into 22. It cannot go exactly into 22. Well, what would be the remainder? It's not a trick question, but how much would the remainder be? The remainder would simply be 2. Now, I know you all can calculate that 2 in your head, but now in primary school, you may not have been so good with the maths as yet. So let's just refresh our memory on how we would get that 2. So you say 5 into 22 is 4, and then what you would do with the 4? You would say 4 multiplied by the 5. Whatever answer you got on top here, you would multiply by the value on the outside. So 4 by 5 is 20. And what did you all do with these two values, the 22 and 20? Do you all remember what you would do? Would you add them or would you subtract them? I know it seems very basic, right? But this same concept is going to be applied today in AdMaths. We would always subtract. Now, 22 minus 20, and we get a remainder. I put R for remainder, what? 2. Now, whenever you get a remainder, like when the remainder is not 0, and you can calmly or clearly say that 5 is not a factor, because for something to be a factor, it would have to go into the number and leave a remainder of 0. The minute you start seeing a non-zero remainder, you know it's not what? A factor. All right. 1 second, guys. Let's have a phone call to take very quickly. Sorry about this. Continue from where we left off, right? So we could comfortably say that 5 is not a factor of 22 because we got a remainder of what? 2. Now, I want you all to note something. Which number is simpler here? Is the 22 simpler? Or is the 4 simpler? Well, which one is the simpler of the two? 22 or 4? Right? Which one is an easier number? 22, right? You all see something. Anytime you take something and divide it by something, the number will get simpler. The answer will get, I hope I spelled simpler correctly. If it's wrong, don't burn on my house or anything. All right. So just a few things to note that are going to be very, very important today, right? I think it's 3 things we have to take away from this. Whenever you divide something and you get a remainder that is not 0, it is not a factor. It is not a factor. Also, at this point here, to get the remainder, we must subtract. Must. It have no exceptions. And also, the third last thing is that when you divide something by something, the answer you get on top here will always be simpler. All right? So we're going to apply this. Now, if they give you this in primary school, this is a breeze. This isn't too hard to do. But suppose you went back to primary school one day and they tell you to divide this madness. What would your reaction be? Instead of the number 22, it have this thing, x cubed plus 5x squared. And instead of the 5 liming on the outside, you see x plus 2. I think at that point, you would just give up in school and you would walk out, right? And that would be the end of your schooling career. But today, I'm going to show you how to divide complex scenarios like this. And what we're trying to do in this question, we're trying to find out if x plus 2 is a factor of this madness underneath here. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find out if the yellow is a factor. Now, if the x plus 2 is indeed a factor, right? If it was indeed a factor, then the remainder at the end of the question would be 0. So let's work out this and see if we get a remainder of 0 or if we don't. So whenever you're dividing these two things, x plus 2, do me a favor, make sure the x comes first and the number comes after. Make sure it's like that. If the examiner put it as 2 plus x, you switch it around so the x comes first and the 2 comes after. That's the best advice I can get. Pay attention to the first term and you will always be dividing by the x. In your head, how much is x cubed divided by x? You're probably, I'm going to do it on the side here. You always take the first item and divide it by the x. X cubed divided by x. I think everyone could safely say that is what? X squared, not right? So x into x cubed is x squared. We have about 3 examples with it today. So if you get on the first one, don't feel bad. 2 more examples. So x into x cubed is x squared. You see this answer that we get here? We're going to multiply both yellow things by this thing on top, which is x squared. So we're going to do it one at a time. X squared, we have to multiply, right? X squared by x is x cubed, and x squared by positive 2 is positive 2x squared. Everyone take down that for me. Don't worry that we have more than one example. So that's again, for those who not taking it down right now, x into x cubed will give you x squared. Whatever we get on top here, we multiply it by the item on the outside. X squared by x is x cubed. X squared by positive 2 is positive 2x squared. Do me a favor, put in all the signs. Now you have to be on the lookout, and you have to be real good with signs today. Like if you see 2 negative signs come together, you know 2 negatives will give you what? A positive. And you notice I line it up. These 2 line up and these 2 line up. What do we have to do with these 2 with these 4 items? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we add them or do we subtract them? Take a guess. Which one do you do? Add or subtract? Subtract. Great. Now do me a favor, right? In school and in a lot of textbooks, they only write 1 minus sign. But nothing wrong with writing 1 minus sign. But they really need to minus these 2 and these 2. So this minus sign applies to him, and it also applies in between these 2. But the thing about it, when you're under stress in the exam, if you write 1 minus sign, and you could forget to have a minus sign here, so do me a favor, put a minus sign here and a minus sign. Put a minus sign in between these 2 and put a minus sign. Waste some ink, right? Write 2 minus signs so you never ever forget. And then put an equal sign here. Well, what 1 line? Let's minus these 2. How much is x cubed minus x cubed? Everybody agrees I'll get 0. X cubed minus. Now, don't put the minus sign in the middle. Do me a favor. Write 2 minus signs, right? Right. X cubed minus x cubed is 0. Now, don't write the 0, right? I don't want you to write the 0. If you are doing everything correct, when you minus the first pair, you will always get 0. Always, always, always. If you do not get 0, that means you're doing something wrong. So I got 0, so I'll make a mental note of it. Minus the next two. How much is positive 5x squared minus positive 2x squared? I'm going to put that in perspective. You have positive 5x squared. We plan to minus, and you have positive 2x squared. Remember, a minus and a plus is what? A minus. So you end up with a minus 2x squared. And we'll get positive 3x squared. Everyone agrees with that? Right? I'm not going to focus too much on science today, right? Because I have to assume the assumption in maths here is that you're pretty okay with science, okay? Everybody with me so far? Positive 5x squared minus positive 2x squared is positive 3x squared. Great. Take down up to there. Remember, don't write down the 0. Now, here's the thing. We dealt with the x cubed. We dealt with the 5x squared. Well, we did some amount of calculations. Who next in line? Who we didn't do anything else with so far? The positive 7. So what's going to happen? The positive 7x is going to drop down and join the party. So the positive 7x is going to drop down here. Write the signs, and we're going to repeat the procedure. Look at the x here. You're paying attention to this line. How much is 3x squared divided by x? Let me put that in perspective. 3x squared divided by x. The first item here divided by the x on the outside. We will get 3x. So 3x squared divided by x is positive 3x. I notice I write in all my signs. This yellow value, what are we going to do with it? We have to multiply both of them by it. Positive 3x by x is positive 3x squared. Positive 3x by positive 2 is positive 6x. Take down up to there. Right. What do we have to do over here? We have to minus both of them. Write 2 separate minus signs. One for him, one for him. Waste the ink. You notice I will get 0 here. 3x squared minus plus 3. Well, we know a minus and a plus is a minus, right? So 3x minus 3x is 0. I make a mental note. I am on the right track because I'm always supposed to get 0 after the first minus. How much is 7x minus 6x? Because a minus and a plus is a minus. 7x minus 6x is just 1x. Right? You can put x alone, but I'm just going to put it 1. Who do you think is going to join the party now? Who has not joined the party as yet and is yet to join the party? The 2, correct. Mr. Positive 2 finally comes down here. And we say x into 1x. Number 1x divided by x is just 1. Take this black value here, this 1, and multiply both of them by 1. 1 by x is positive 1x. 1 by 2 is positive 2. We put 2 minus signs here. We know this minus, this supposed to give us 0. And yes, it does give us 0. And look at the last part of the question now. 2 minus 2. Our final value is 0. We have nothing else to do. This is your remainder. Do you think x plus 2 was a factor? Yes or no? Is x plus 2 a factor? Because just note that at the end of the question, we got 0. So yes, x plus 2 is a factor. Right? And if they ask you what is the remainder or what is your proof of that, well, you could say what? The remainder was 0 and you have all your working to show it. Now notice something. You notice the part underneath this, the divide sign, the initial part in white. You notice this is x cubed plus 5x squared plus 7x plus 2. It had 4 items and an x cubed. After you divided it, did we get something simpler on top? You notice this here, well, this is not a real name, but I just call anything with a cubedratic. That's not a real word, but it's a word I just use. On top, after we divided, what did we get? Did we get a quadratic? Because a quadratic has an x squared, an x and something without an x. Well, everyone should know that by now. Do we all agree a quadratic is way simpler than a cubedratic? Dividing something by something will always result in an answer that's always simpler. And that's a good reason for dividing. So you can end up with something simpler. When you end up with something simpler, your calculations afterwards will be easier. Okay? Right. So is there another way of finding the remainder? Right? Right? The name of this topic is remainder and factor theorem. Right? So is there another way of finding the remainder? Like, do we always have to go through this crazy long procedure to figure out, hey, the remainder was 0? The truth is, there is another way. Let me show you the shortcut. But there's a huge disadvantage of the shortcut, a huge disadvantage. But you need to know both for the exam. Both of them have their strengths and weaknesses. Here's what you have to do. The shortcut is this. Take whatever you are dividing by. Today, we are dividing by x plus 2. Take whatever you are dividing by, which is x plus 2 today, and always put it equal to 0. Always. Just take what you're dividing by, and just put it equal to 0. As simple as that. And when you put it equal to 0, solve for x. Solve for x. So if we solve for x here, we're lucky today that to solve for x is very easy. You throw across positive 2. I think we all could agree we would get minus 2. So when we solve for x and get minus 2, here's what to do now. Go to the scary looking equation and replace all the x's with 0. So let me do that for you. Remember, we have x cubed here, plus 5x squared, plus 7x plus 2. We're going to replace all the x's with 0. But do it in brackets, it's really important. Minus 2 in brackets cubed, plus 5. This squared only belongs to the x. So it's minus 2 in brackets squared, plus 7 minus 2 plus 2. Work this out and tell me if you still get back 0. You can type in that straight on the calculator, but you need to put the minus 2 in brackets. Otherwise, your calculator will misinterpret it. And I guarantee if we work this out, we will get back 0. This is the shortcut for finding 0. The remainder, sorry. Let's take a few seconds and I have to discuss a few things on this slide. Now, we have to be careful, right? This x plus 2, here's what we call a factor. A factor can go into something and leave a remainder of 0. X plus 2 is the factor. The actual value of minus 2, you see how x is minus 2? The minus 2 is called the solution, right? A factor and a solution makes everything boil down to 0. But when you have the x next to the 2, you just call it a factor. When you solve for x and get minus 2, the minus 2 itself is called the solution. I don't want you all to mix up the words, right? The factor and the solution are slightly different, right? Right? The solution is the actual value of x that makes the whole thing boil down to 0. The factor has to be divided into it in order to get 0, a slight difference. right? So don't worry, guys, you're going to get another example in a little while. I have 3 examples later. Whenever you do a past paper question, sometimes you will be forced to use the shortcut, and sometimes you will be forced to use the long method. So I know what you're thinking already. How are you supposed to know which method to use? The shortcut or the long method? Don't worry, when we start the past paper questions and we do enough, it will be obvious which one you need to use, but it will take a lot of practice. It's not an easy question to say you have to use the short one all the time or the long method all the time. But what's the major disadvantage of the shortcut method? When you use the shortcut method, will you end up with the quadratic on top? What do you all think? Will the shortcut method give you the quadratic on top? The answer is 100% no, right? So sometimes if you read the question properly, it's hinted that you need the quadratic to complete the question. Like the examiner mightn't say outright he wants the quadratic, but he was suggested in a kind of riddle way that you need the quadratic in order to finish the question. So if you realize that the quadratic on top is needed, sorry, you're going to have to do it the long method. If the quadratic on top is not needed, like it's not suggested or hinted, feel free to use the shortcut method to save time. All right, so let's move on, guys. Let's move on, right? Let's start this story, because we didn't really start the story yet. So this is it here. Yes, 1890, right? Way back, about 100 years back, and we have this scary forests and whatnot. And this is your story. You are this guy called, or person called Sanchez. You are a murderer. You're hiding out in the forest in in Maracas Valley, somewhere there. And back then it was just forests and whatnot, right? And suddenly you hear a terrible scream. And this woman appears. This fishy already, right? Because anybody wonder, like, why is this woman walking around in the forest? And we just heard somebody scream, right? So she tells you this. Right, so you're gonna tell me whether you're gonna trust this lady, go with her, or you're just gonna run. You never know. Next thing you know, she really trying to help you out. You know, life can be funny. Don't judge a book by its cover. All right, guys. So y'all want to try this one before I want you to do this the long way. I know some of you all there was like, oh God, let me do this one with you. Let me do this one with you. I think some of you already need to see it a second way. So you're going to divide this, right? Now you got to be real careful when you're dividing. When it starts with x cubed, the next one has to be x squared. The next one has to be x. And the last one must not have an x. It has to go in, well, you call this descending order of x powers, right? So I'm just saying that again, because I'm going to try to trick you in the next question. It must have an x cubed, followed by an x squared, followed by regular boring x, and then somebody without x. We are going to divide by x minus 3. And we're going to try to figure out when we divide by x minus 3, if we're going to get what? A remainder or not get a remainder. So we start off with this one here, x. Look at the first value, 2x cubed. So you say 2x cubed, and you divide it by x. You're going to obviously get what? 2x squared. But this x will cancel out with the cube to give you squared. So x into 2x cubed is 2x squared. Take down up to there. X into 2x cubed is 2x squared. This 2x squared, this green value, you're going to multiply it by both of them, by the x and the minus 3. 2x squared multiplied by x is 2x cubed, and 2x squared by minus 3, that is minus 3, is minus 6x squared. Take down up to there. Signs are super important. That is what the examiner is going to catch you with. Right? When you reach there, remember, I want you all to write 2 separate minus signs. 1, 2. I don't want you writing 1. Waste ink. Put your equal sign here. Remember, I told you all in the first minus, you're supposed to get 0. That lets you know that you're on the right track. 2x cubed minus 2x cubed is 0. What number will we get here? Let me see if I can trick you all. What number will we get here? 3x squared minus 6x squared. What to put here? Let me see if I catch you all with those minus signs. Alia, correct. Anastasia, correct, right? All right, you're not getting catch, right? Isn't it 9x squared? Because a minus and a minus is a plus. You're reading it downwards, but you imagine it horizontal. 3x squared minus 6x squared. A minus and a minus is a plus. And don't forget the squared, right? Who is going to join the party now? Well, Mr. Minus 17. Nobody had invited him, so he invites himself now. We restart the process. We say x into the first item, x into 9x squared. So you're taking the 9x squared and dividing it by x. You're obviously going to get 9x. X into 9x squared is positive 9x. Make sure you put your signs in between. If you put nothing here, it's going to automatically be a multiply. We don't want it to be a multiply. Take the 9x and multiply by both items outside. 9x by x is 9x squared. 9x by minus 3 is minus 27x. Don't get lazy with the minus signs. 1 here and 1 here. 9x squared minus 9x squared is 0. I'm going on the right track because I'm supposed to get 0. How about this one here? I'm going to write back this one here. This one is minus 17x minus 27. I had to write this one. 2 minus signs is a positive, right? How much we get in there? I need my calculator for that one. For some reason, I want to. That's 11? No, oh, that's 10. Oh, shucks. That's 10x. Positive 10x, right? Who is going to join the party now? Mr. Minus 30. He finally gets an invite. X into 10x, right? If you take 10x and divide it by x, you're going to be left with 10. So x into 10x is just 10. Take the 10 and multiply it by both values. 10 by x is positive 10x. 10 by minus 3 is minus 30. Put 1 minus sign and minus sign. This one will automatically give you 0. And it just so happens the last final answer is also 0. Minus 30 minus 30. 2 minuses are positive. So you end up with minus 30 plus 30, which is 0. So is x plus 3 a factor? Yes or no? Is it fair to say x plus 3 is a factor? Yes, because our final remainder at the end of the question was 0. Use the shortcut method and tell me if you still get 0, right? Just to be sure, It's more for you, for me to make an excuse so that you will refresh the procedure in your head. Right? Just to say, yes, you're getting 0, work it back out and get the 0. See it physically in front of you. Right? Remember the shortcut method. Take what you are dividing by, which is x minus 3. You put 0. solve for x. Throw across -3, you'll get +3. Go and replace all the x's here with +3, right? So you have 2. Right, so it's just to work it out on a calculator and to remember to put the item in brackets, otherwise your calculator will misinterpret it. And I guarantee you, you're going to get back 0. Make it a little, for those who are a little lost on the first run, take it, make it a little bit more. All right, so the story does continue. So she takes you back to her village, right? This is obviously one of those old time houses, or forts in Trinidad. This is how they used in the folk time, with the little big stones in the walls and whatnot. So she tells everyone that you are a hero and you saved her. Man on a horse here to hear what he has to say. Right, so she turns out to be the Baroness of the, I'm not sure if I pronounced that word correct. So they were out on a search party looking for her, right? Well, it seems you're getting a lot of big up here from this lady, that you're this brave hero, right? Right. So she tells them to open the gates and you all go into the fort. All right, guys. Now, this question here, right? This is how it came in the exam. They had asked you all to divide it, but they didn't give you all an x value. The question was just simply divide 2x cubed minus x squared and had -1, but it had no x value. The trick in this question, for this procedure to work, you must have an x cubed, you must have an x squared, you must have an x and then something without x. So anytime they don't give you an x value, it is your duty to put positive 0x. You have to put that in. Otherwise, the whole question will shut down. Okay? So that was the trick in this particular question. I want you all to do it 2 ways. The short way, but the long way first, and then the short way. And let me know if x plus 2 is indeed a factor, or do we actually get a non-zero remainder? Good luck. All right, let's see. X into 2x cubed is 2x squared. Take the 2x squared and multiply it by 2 values here. 2x squared by x is 2x cubed. 2x squared by positive 2 is 4x squared. Put a minus sign, put a minus sign. Minus these two, you're going to get 0. So I'm on the right track. But then we have minus 1x squared minus 4x squared. Remember, a minus and a positive is a minus. So minus 1x squared minus 4x squared. I'm getting minus 5x squared. How much people had the minus 5x squared? If you have that wrong, well, everything else falls apart from there. Make sure you have that, right? Because it's minus x squared minus plus 4x squared. Minus and a plus is a minus. The 0x jumps in, joins the party. X into minus 5x squared is minus 5x. Right? In case you can't see that, minus 5x squared divided by x is minus 5x. Take the minus 5x and multiply it by both of them. Minus 5x by x is minus 5x squared. minus 5x by positive 2 is minus 10x. Put a minus, put a minus. Minus 5x squared minus minus will give you a plus. So we're going to get 0 here. No, we're going to get 0 here. 0 minus minus 10x. That is positive 10x. Minus 1 joins the party here. X into 10x is positive 10, right? 10 by x is 10x. 10 by 2 is positive 20. Power minus. This here gives us 0. I have no problem with that. But minus 1 minus positive 20. I think the final answer is minus 21. Minus 1 minus 20. The remainder is what? Minus 21. We did not get 0 this time. Hence, this is not a factor. And if you do it the other way now, like you put x plus 2 is equal to 0 and you solve for x, you'll get minus 2, right? Replace all the x's with minus 2. And I think you'll still get back minus 21. But the thing about it, since this is not a factor, when you put this equal to 0 and x, and you solve for x and you get x is minus 2, this is not a solution. A solution is only make it equal to 0. If the x minus 2 is unable to bring the equation to 0, then it is not a solution. Right, so let me know when you guys finished and ready to move on to the next slide. Let's go. All right, so we have another one here, but the only difference with this one, right, is that instead of it just being x plus something, this time it's 2x plus 1. It's the same procedure. You're taking the 2x cubed and dividing it by 2x. You're starting off with that. So you're taking 2x cubed and you're dividing it by 2x. So I'll start you up with the first one. If you do that, this and this will cancel out. Your first one will be x squared. Take it from there, right? Okay. Right. So the first piece is on the screen here already. So when we minus here, we're going to get 0 minus 1x squared minus 1x squared, minus and a plus. Did you all get the minus 2x squared there? Because if you get this wrong here, well, everything's going to fall apart from there. Right, so minus 1x squared minus 1x squared. Positive 4x joins the party. Let me see. 2x into minus 2x squared. Minus 2x squared divided by 2x. You'll get minus 1x, right? Or some people might just put minus x, but we know the one understood. Minus 1x multiply, you'll get minus 2x squared here. Okay. No problem, Kenya. Minus 1x by positive 1 is minus 1x. Put some minus signs here. And then minus these two, we will get 0. 4 minus minus, that'll give us 5x. Look at right? So the positive 2 joins the party. Right? So the how we got the minus 1x, the working is here. Remember, you have minus 2x squared divided by 2x. Let me write it back here. Minus 2x squared, that is this guy here, divided by 2x. 2 on the 2 will cancel out. X on the square, you get minus x, which is the same thing as minus 1x. Right. I think we're gonna get a decimal in this one, right? If I'm not mistaken. Because here we have 5x and we have to divide it by 2x. Huh? So 5x, that's this guy here, divided by 2x. Nothing wrong with that decimal. X and the x will cancel out. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. 2.5 by 2x is 5x. 2.5 by 1 is 2.5. Put your minus signs in between. 5x minus 5x is 0, but 2 minus 2.5, I get my final remainder as minus a half, minus 0.5. Anybody can agree with me on that? Justine, right? You have that. And you can do it what? The shortcut way as well, right? Now, for the shortcut way, remember, when you put it 2x plus 1 is equal to 0, and you solve for x, remember you're throwing across positive 1, you will get minus 1. 2 is a multiply, you get a divide. So when you solve for x, you'll get minus 0.5. You have to go and replace all the x's here with minus 0.5. And when you work that out, it just so happens you get back minus 0.5. So now replace all the x's inside here with brackets and put minus 0.5. And once again, when you work that out, you're going to get back the same remainder as minus 0.5. So since we got a non-zero remainder, this is not a factor. And this x minus a half is not a solution, because a solution would have brought you to a 0, but it didn't. And so keep that in the back of your head, right? The solution will always bring you to 0. All right. So we're inside the gates now. It seems like a nice village. So you walk through the village and then suddenly you hear the bells. Well, long time when they hear the bells like that, right? I mean, someone has died, or they find a body or something like that. So apparently they found a body in the forest. And guess who they suspect? You are the new guy in town. So who do you think they're going to blame or suspect? You, the innocent murderer on the run. Right? So they arrest the hero, which is you. Right? So she tells you to go peacefully with the guards. You don't know, like they have a choice, right? Until they find your real murderer. You're real suspecting the Baroness as being the bad person. The lady trying to help you. She said she would talk it through with the guards. She would clear your name. Have some confidence in the lady. Anyway, guys, let's move on. Okay. So let's say now they ask you to solve this polynomial. Forget the divide sign, that's for later on, right? Do you all remember how to solve a quadratic? Remember when you had a quadratic for homework, like you had 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. Do you all remember how to solve a quadratic? You would use this formula, the minus the, you all know the big scary formula, right? I'm not gonna go through the whole thing now. So you all know how to solve a quadratic. And remember, a quadratic has an x squared, an x, and something without an x. How much answers do you normally get when you solve a quadratic? Do you all remember? When you solve a quadratic, how much answers you normally get? And you all have it correct. You all are saying 2 answers. So whenever the biggest power of x is x squared, which is what a quadratic is, right? The biggest power in a quadratic is x squared. You get 2 answers. So when it's x cubed, how much answers do you think you will get? It's not a trick question. 3, right? But You see how the quadratic has a decently, well, I won't call this the easiest formula in the world, but isn't there a formula to solve a quadratic? Unfortunately, for a quadratic, there is a formula, but the formula not on the syllabus. And believe me, you do not want to see that formula. It's the scariest looking formula in the world. You will never ever be able to memorize that formula in any case. So to solve a quadratic, there's a different approach. Something I actually don't like. You just have to guess the first solution. Remember, you have 3 answers to get, right? A quadratic has 3 answers. 1, 2, 3. The first answer, I'm not lying to you. You have to guess it. Sounds crazy, right? Because it can have an infinite amount of guesses, right? But it's CXC. The guess could be either one of these numbers, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or -1, -2, -3, or -4. You will have to guess what value of x. Sorry, you have to guess what to replace x with to get 0. Y'all want to take a try? For example, if I was in the exam, I have to guess the first value, the first solution. So usually I start with 1. I'm going to replace all the x's with 1. I want you all to do that for me. Replace all the x's with 1, work it out, and tell me if you get 0. If you get 0 when you replace all the x's with 1, well, you're lucky. That's the first solution. But if 1 don't work, I just try -1. And if -1 don't work, I just try 2. Then I'll try -2, 3, and then -3, and see which one gives me 0. You all can imagine how much time that eats up in the exam, where you have to guess the first value of x. You all can confirm it's 1. How is the first question? I probably made it to be 1. Everyone agrees that. Make sure, because if 1 is not a solution, let me double check it. 1 to the power 3 is 1, 1 by 2 is 2. 1 squared is 1, 1 by 3 is 3. Yeah. The answer is 1. All right, great. It's the first question, so that's probably why. So we guessed our first value, or our first solution is 1, right? Remember, it has 3 solutions, so it has 2 outstanding solutions. Since 1 is our first solution, here's what you have to do. You take the opposite of the first solution and put it next to the x. You put x and put the opposite of the first solution. So if the solution is +1, put -1. I'm just saying, if the first value was -2, like if our first guess was -2, you would have had x +2. Everybody with me so far? You guess the first value of x, that gives you 0. That's your first solution. Then you take that first solution and you put it next to the x, the opposite of it next to the x. Do me a favor now, divide this by x -1. So our first solution is x is 1. That was our first guess. Divide this whole thing now by x -1. And since we are sure x -1 is a factor, when you divide it down, you will get 0. If you don't get 0, that means you did something wrong. Solutions always give you 0. Yeah. X into 2x cubed is 2x squared. Take this, multiplied by both of them. I'm going to speed through this part, right? Because I think everyone may have gotten accustomed to it by now. Put a minus, put a minus. 0 here. I'm getting 5x squared here. -3x joins the party. X into 5x squared is +5x. Minus. 0 here. Minus 3x minus minus. 2 minuses are positive. I think we get in 2x here. Then Mr. Minus 2 drops down here. X into 2x is positive 2. Yeah, man, we get 0. Right? Now, we are supposed to get 0, right? So our first solution is x equal to 0. But when we divided it, we put the opposite of the number next to x. Remember, we have 2 more solutions to get, right? We just guess the first solution. But to get the other 2 solutions, we do not guess it. After you divide it, don't we get a quadratic on top? Focus on the quadratic you got. Solve the quadratic. And when you solve a quadratic, you just get 2 answers. Guess what? Those will be the 2 other answers, making it how much answers in all? 3. You guess the first answer, and then you do the division, get the quadratic, and when you solve the quadratic, you get the remaining 2 answers. So in case you can't remember, whoever touching x squared is A, whoever touching x is what? B, and everybody else is C. Right? Just once, I'll put back the quadratic formula for those who are a little bit rusty on it. Right? But for the rest of class, I will not be putting the quadratic because remember, we had that for homework. How much weeks now we had to prepare this? About 5 weeks. Right? Let's just see here. Right, so Anastasia, you have an answer. Remember, it is a replacing game here. B with 5, 5, 2, and 2, and 2. When you worked out the piece underneath the square root sign, the discriminant, then that's before you square rooted it. What will you all get there? 4 by 2, 2. Did you all get 9? I'm getting 9. So when you square root the 9, you're going to get 3. So it's 5 plus or minus 3 divided by 4. Right? Well, I showed you all how to do it last week, right? So it's 5 plus 3, make sure it's in brackets, and the other one is minus 5 minus 3 in brackets and divided by 4. I believe you're going to get minus 0.5 and minus 2. Those are your other 2 missing answers, minus 0.5 and minus 2. You have all 3 solutions for your quadratic now. The first one is a guess. The other 2 you get via the quadratic equation. Right? Do you all think you all could have done this using the shortcut method? What do you all think? If they ask you to solve a polynomial, can you use the shortcut method? Right, and Chantal, correct. The answer would be no. Because if you use the shortcut method, you would not have gotten the quadratic on top. And it's the quadratic we need specifically to get the other 2 answers. What's going on with this lady here? Right, so well, basically they take the prisoner, right? They tie him up for your hands and carry into the prison towers where you pass this scary looking guillotine here. I can only guess that's for you if they find you guilty. But don't worry. The baronesses will clear your name. I'm confident of this. Right, so here's one to try on your own. Guess the first value of x, right? When you guess it, let me know and I'll let the class know. What's the first value of x that makes the entire equation boil down to 0? So So we guessed x minus 2 as the first solution, right? So that means the first factor is x minus 2, right? Now, with this guy here, the one where you put the opposite next thing, he is the factor. This guy is the solution. So x into x cubed is x squared. X cubed minus x cubed is 0. I'm on the right track. Minus 3x squared plus 2x squared, because 2 minus signs here. I'm getting minus 1x squared. Bring down Mr. X here. X, you'll get minus x here, or minus 1x if you want to put it 1. Positive 2x. Yeah, seems correct. This boils down to 0, and x minus 2x, a plus and a minus is minus 1x. That looks correct, yeah. X into minus 1x is minus 1. Oh, I forgot the Mr. 2 had to join the party here. Yeah, man, everything boils down to 0. So we got the 0 here. So this is definitely a factor, making this definitely a solution. You just need to solve this quadratic now. When you're solving this quadratic, remember, this x squared is really 1x squared. So A is 1, B is minus 1, and C is minus 1. Plenty minus signs, huh? Take your time, solve it. And I would put down the two answers we're supposed to get when we solve this quadratic. When you solve, this is for recording purposes, right? When you solve the quadratic, you'll get these two answers here. Because I believe when you put it in here, it will be 1 plus or minus the square root of minus 1 squared minus 4ac. Remember, the formula had minus b at the beginning, and b was already negative 1. So two negatives would have touched to give you a positive, and then divided by this. Underneath the square root sign, the discriminant, that's before you square root it, you were supposed to get 5. So double check that. That's before you square root it. Right, so these are our solutions, our 3 solutions. All right, so they lock you into this little this dungeon here while you await trial. You all will notice that there's a skeleton in there. Probably the last person who got accused of killing someone in the forest. But then a spirit appears. And she tells you something, or something like that. This is what she says.
She reeks of evil, and has no love for people. She may look kind and gentle, but she be the daughter of the devil. She said she would clear my name. Instead, she told the village I was to blame.
All right, so who do you think that she's referring to? It's obvious that she's referring to the guy on the horse, right? Plain as day, guy on the horse. Right? Told you all the guy on the horse was the person. All right, so let's move on here. All right, so this one here is slightly different, right? They want you to solve, but sorry, but this one here, let's just scratch off this here. All right, so they want you to factorize this. Now, the difference between factorizing and how you say solving something, factorizing is when you want everything in brackets. Now, when you factorize a quadratic, you just get 2 brackets. But when you factorize a cubadratic, you will get how much? 3 brackets. But anyway, I will show you how to do this question. It's only slightly different. You're still going to have to guess the first value of x that will make everything 0. You think you all can do that for me? And once somebody gets the answer, I will share it with the class. So guess the first value of x that will reduce the whole thing with 0. Somebody said it's 1. Could you all confirm that? 1 minus 6. Just confirm it there. All right, so it's confirmed when x is 1. Now remember, x equal to 1 is a solution. X minus 1 is a factor. Quickly divide this by the factor. Now, when you get a quadratic on top, do not solve it, because they're not really asking you to solve it. They want you to factorize it. So do me a favor, just divide this by x minus 1, the factor, get the quadratic, and wait on me. So you get x squared here, then x cubed minus x squared, minus. X into this is minus 5. No, x squared. Minus 1x minus 5 minus 6x, right? This jumps down here. Yeah. Yeah, we get 0. I'm getting 0. Right, now here's the thing. Do you all remember how to factorize a quadratic? Remember, the first factor was x minus 1. To get the other two factors, you're not solving the quadratic. You are just factorizing the quadratic. So when you factorize this quadratic, you will get 2 pairs of brackets. And once you do that, you're finished. So they don't actually want you to go ahead and solve it now. They just want you to factorize it and put the 3 factors next to each other. That's the only difference. Okay. Factorize it. Well, when you take this quadratic and you factorize it, you'll get x here, positive 1 and minus 6. This is the end of the question. They didn't ask you to solve it. This is the final thing you write for your answer when they ask you to factorize it. Right? If anybody doesn't know how to factorize a quadratic, I'm not too sure if that was part of the homework, but if you can't remember how to factorize it from maths, after class, you can ask me and I'll give you a full tutorial on it, right? On how to factorize quadratics. I have an entire tutorial to refresh your memory in case you forgot. All right, let's move on. All right, so apparently a lot in your cell, but those are the bars. I'm sure you can see the bars there left behind. Oh, so right now the guard is paralyzed by some sort of magic. Let's see who appears. It's the Baroness. Oh, I thought it would have been the man on the horse, but all right. And then she transforms into her true self. So she removes the all right, so she's been feasting on the people in the village for years. All right, probably didn't have a KFC back then. All right. So unfortunately, you don't make it out alive, guys. Remember, And after she feast on you, she gets the guards to bury your body in the unmarked grave in the famous St. Joseph Cemetery, guys. So, guys, this here is the story. It was actually your grave is the unmarked grave in the cemetery. Plot twist. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed. Jeff, but obviously this is not a real story. It's not a real story. All right, guys. I want to give you all the homework here, right? So when you all go to the admats classroom, everyone knows the password by now, right? ACID. Okay. When you scroll down, I want you all to look for logs. It's 2 videos, video 1 and video 2. You have here what I'll do. I'll give you all 3 weeks to watch the 2 videos. Sounds fair enough, guys? Let me know 3 weeks is good enough. Oh, by the way, in terms of whether this story is true, the thing about the unmarked grave, as far as I know, is true, right? It's just that, you know, the part with the Baroness and the larger bless there and left. Obviously, it's not real, unless you believe in that kind of stuff. All right, so it's logs, and guys, give it a good. And I think I trust this class enough for the majority of people in this class, right? I know you all is like, you know, watch the videos, you just make your notes and everything. So continue to do that, and then you all are going to get tested on the logs. All right. All right, guys, that's it today. Hope you all have a good night's sleep, sweet dreams. Try not to dream about anything scary. You know, good night, guys. Like, coming up to Halloween, I'll have lots of horror stories coming up. Yeah, don't let the Baroness catch you.